Welcome. We're going to get together again to have another discussion on Alan Gewirth. Today, we're going to be talking with Klaus Steigleder, who's a professor of applied ethics at the Institute of Philosophy at Ruhr University, Bochum, Germany. His current research foci are on risk ethics, climate ethics, and energy ethics. He is also working on the foundations of normative ethics and the methods of applied ethics. In 2 books and several articles, he has explained, defended, and developed the justification of the principle of morality, the PGC, set out by American philosopher Alan Gewirth in his book, Reason and Morality. I have a question for you. Here we go. You say that so far, most people have focused on the first justificatory part, which would be the first 3 chapters of Reason and Morality, and have neglected the second part, which are the last 2 chapters of the book. Why do you think this focus is so one-sided and deplorably neglects the second part of the book, which is especially important? Can you give us your ideas on that?
Yes. Gewirth makes strong justificatory claims in his book, and so it is understandable that this draws attention to it and is discussed. But in doing so, one can overlook that the theory Alan Gewirth tried to defend and to justify is very attractive in itself. And even if you do not share his justificatory claims, you can say, okay, it is a very plausible, very attractive theory. And maybe we should take a closer look at it. So the basic claim is that all people have equal rights to the necessary conditions for being able to lead their lives, to be able to act at all and to act successfully at all. And these necessary conditions are, for instance, freedom, life, physical and psychological integrity, to mention only the most basic ones. And the next claim is that these rights, are not all on the same level. There's a ranking between the rights, there's a certain hierarchy. And this ranking depends on the situational indispensability of these rights. So life is completely indispensable. Non-essential property is not so indispensable in a certain situation. For instance, if one person is starving and another person has food in abundance, then there might be a right of the starving person that the person with the food gives some of his food to the person, and others have the right to take from the food if necessary, to give just an example. So that's attractive to have a basis for weighing different rights to decide normative conflicts of goals, which we are increasingly confronted with in the very complicated problems of our times. Think of the corona pandemic, think of climate problem. In Europe, we have this energy crisis, and so on. A next claim is that the rights of people are not only negative rights, rights to the forbearance of others, but are also at the same time positive rights, rights to the assistance of others if certain conditions are met. Yeah? And these conditions, as Gewirth explains, are basically that one is not able to help oneself, and another person is able to help at no comparable cost. So if I am drowning, you are not obligated to try to save me. If you could only do it by risking your own life, because we have the equal right to life. My life is not more important than your life. Yeah? But if you could do it by throwing a rope, then you are strictly obligated to do this. Yeah? And we can see that this very attractive criterion of the no comparable cost presupposes the ranking of the rights. If a theory has no place for ranking the rights, then it cannot have any place for positive rights. Yeah, so if you look at Robert Nozick's book Anarchy, State and Utopia of 1974, for him, all rights are on the same level, and therefore he has no place for positive rights. But I think it is not very plausible to presuppose it. Yeah? So if we have these rights, then on an individual level, these rights are probably quite restricted. Maybe we have to assist in mostly in cases of an acute emergency. Yeah? But these are not the only problems. There are very often chronic needs of people, and for an individual person to help in these cases of chronic needs, it is easily the case that it cannot be done at no comparable cost. Yeah. But what cannot be done individually can be done collectively. It can be organized, the help can be institutionalized and so on. And it is part of our rights that measures are taken to do so. Yeah? And under conditions of modern societies, which huge division of labor with certain family structures and so on, probably it has to be done by state institutions, by the institutions of a social state. Yeah? And this aspect of developing, of securing the positive rights of people is only one aspect of a wider claim Gewirth very convincingly makes, namely that our rights are not only something to be declaimed, but are something which must be effectively protected, because the rights are normative entitlements we have, and so we must contribute to the effective protection of these rights. Yeah. And this makes certain institutions necessary, and in Reason of Morality, Gewirth develops this on the level of the state, and he develops a very attractive political theory. So there must be the institutions of the state. There must be something like the minimal state with juridical systems, police, and so on, certain basic infrastructure. There must also be these institutions further developed to social state. There must be a health system, there must be basic health care, there must be an educational system, there must be measures for old age, social protection, and so on. Yeah. And he is very well aware that the concrete design of these institutions is quite disputed, and he's not claiming that there's only one way to organize this, one perfect solution. And therefore, he says, so there must be room for political discussion. The state must be organized as a democracy. There must be civil liberty. So the state must be also organized as a democratic constitutional state. Yeah? So I'm only roughly outlining it. It is very attractive and very insightful what the explanations Alan Gewirth gives. It is clear that in a way we probably need further institutions, not only on the state level, but also on the international level, on the global level. And this is not something Gewirth did in Reasonable Morality, but he was very well aware of this need at the end of his life. So he worked on the right to global justice and so on. I think the important thing is that these further institutions, international institutions, global institutions, which we are still not very good about, so we do not know much how to organize them, what we need, how we can bring them about, how we can broaden the existing institutions. But nevertheless, that these still to be established institutions are not to be set in place of the state, of the territorial state. They must supplement the institutions of a territorial state. Yeah? And I think this is very important to see the normative relevance, one could say the normative dignity of existing territorial states, because they are in a way the means we know so far, which can bring about, often they do not, but which are able to bring about the effective protection of the rights of people living in this territory. Yeah? And because people contribute to the institutions of the state, are supporting them and so on, they have a right to be in a way the primary beneficiaries of these institutions. So it is the territorial state is, so to say, a room of special responsibility of the government for its own people. This does not mean that one may neglect people living outside the state, that one may neglect the need of people to enter the state, to immigrate, the duty of a state to take up refugees and so on. But it means that nevertheless, state borders, the borders of a territorial state, are very important. Yeah? They must be, on the whole, protected. And I think this is something which is very often neglected in modern political theory, modern political philosophy, where it is often said that in a way, state borders are something unjust, which are something from older times, and we have to supersede this. But I think as the positive obligations of individuals are limited to certain conditions, so are the obligations of a government, of the state. Yeah? In a way, we can, in a way, and have to apply the criteria that one cannot help oneself, that another can help at no comparable cost, to the obligations of the state. Yeah? It needs work to explain this, to apply these criteria, but in a way, the criterion of non-comparable costs will include that a state must not endanger the basic institutions, the functioning of the institutions of the state. So if, say, the healthcare system, the educational system, housing, and so on would be overwhelmed, that would be a very bad thing, because it would no longer allow the effective protections of the people living in a state, on the territory of a state. And therefore, in principle, migration must be limited. Yeah? And this may involve terrible decisions, as the decision not to save the drowning person may involve terrible decision, but it is important. Yeah? I'm not saying that these few remarks already solve the complicated problem of migration, but I would say what Gewirth offers on differentiated criteria and the relation of these criteria, his theory provides in a way a basis of working on these problems and developing a good theory of migration ethics, for example. Yeah. If we look at the theory of the moral theory, then this theory is very much concerned with the consequences our actions, the framework conditions of action have on the rights of affected people. So it is a theory very much concerned with consequences. So being concerned with consequences not reserved to utilitarian theories, but the way the consequences are evaluated are different from utilitarianism. Utilitarianism, in a way, is concerned with the cumulative consequences. And the focus of a theory of moral rights is distributive. So we have to look, how is each person affected, in what rights? And as I said, if we have a ranking of rights, maybe the more important right of one person may outweigh the less important right of another person situationally. But in principle, it's not possible to sacrifice one person for the well-being of other people. Yeah? So this is different, and this is attractive. And I would say there's also another attractive feature. Utilitarianism has the an external perspective of an impartial observer, so to say. If a person is drowning, a mother of 5 children, at the same time does important work on vaccines and so on, then as a potential lifesaver, you have to look at yourself and say, okay, I'm only reading books and writing something. So maybe the expectation expectation value of, say, the mother higher than the expectation value of living my life. So the utilitarian might say, then you have to save the mother. Yeah? But in the theory developed by Gewirth, we have an internal perspective. So we are approaching the rights of others from within the perspective of our own rights. Yeah? And I think that's a very attractive and very plausible feature. So to summarize again, I think it is a very attractive theory which develops plausible criteria which can be acknowledged and shared from people who have many different theoretical backgrounds, and it is certainly rewarding to focus on this theory in more detail.
Well, thank you very much, Klaus. Those are very good remarks, and it puts a kind of a holistic understanding of the Gewirthian perspective there, and that should be very useful to our listeners. And we certainly appreciate you taking your time today to share these remarks with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.